All right, folks, make sure that technology is running smoothly. And you can do that by talking to Chris at Tech Support Farm because he can make sure that you aren't getting hacked. If you do, there's some recovery. He can also make sure that you have your correct encryptions, your your VPNs, your large passwords, all the things that need to be done. So get a hold of Chris over at Tech Support Farm. Now, we are lucky to have with us today a guest who is joining us from the Farm Journal Foundation. And that guest would be Todd Greenwood. And when I first met folks from the Farm Journal Foundation, A, I didn't know the foundation existed, and B, the things that they do. So, Todd, let's start there, shall we?
Thanks. Appreciate the opportunity. So Farm Journal Foundation, we are the not-for-profit side of Farm Journal Media. So most of the folks will recognize those legacy names, and that would include Bovine Vet and Drover's Journal. We are, as a foundation, while we are DC based, we focus on several key issues from global international food development, and then in the U.S., it's rural economic development, supporting our rural farmers and their communities. We work with a network of farmer ambassadors in about 30 states. We work with them to elevate the issues that impact them, that would impact trade, things like investment in ag research, veterinary shortages that would impact them. And we do that through the ambassador network. We drive thought leadership, we build coalitions, and in this case, we have programmatic elements that we work with in the states.
Now, Todd, as I think about some of the things that you do, the first question that we wanted to talk about was the situation where we're in with large animal veterinarians right now. And because Drovers, of course, spends an awful lot of time as a publication talking about the livestock industry. Let's start there. What are some of the things that you have seen through your publications and some of those farmer ambassadors that you've talked to?
So, great question. So, we conduct research at the state level, and then we obviously follow the trends of the national livestock groups, and a lot of it has to do with where livestock numbers are changing at the state level. Obviously, and the cattle numbers are shrinking, but we have to peel that back and see what's happening and how that impacts rural communities. So when you look at growth in some of the livestock sectors, especially cattle, dairy, you might look at a state and by pure USDA NASS data and think that the numbers are really good. But when you peel it back, you look at the average herd size, at 30, 40 head in some cases, and what's happening to the mid-size and small-size farms, those decreases have an economic impact at those rural communities, and thus then the viability of having a thriving veterinary practice as well. And so we try to make sure that the states are aware of what the trends are. And when I say states, it's all the stakeholders that are in the state that those numbers could impact. But we definitely we're seeing it in our numbers, and it's a change. It's unfortunate in some cases when you think about the economic viability of these communities.
And Todd, there's a shortage of large animal vets. What do you think the reason is behind that?
Boy, how much time do we have today?
Right. Plenty.
Plenty. So I want all of these notes, by the way.
You got it. Happy to provide. So there's several factors, and so one, you think about the changes in the rural communities. So myself personally, my dad is a veterinarian. We live in Indiana. He has been practicing since 1969. We, grew up in the least populated county in the state, very rural. When I grew up, we were on really almost every farm in our county and some in the surrounding counties. Those farms were diversified. Everybody had either some pigs and to cattle, grain, row crops, you name it. Fast forward, that practice, has transitioned from what was 90% large animal to now 10%. And so you start to see that, and you start to see shrinking herd sizes and just availability of livestock to work on. So that's one factor. And the other is the income to education debt ratio, which is going up. And you think about graduating with over 180 to over 200 $1,000 in student debt versus the income possibilities in rural communities that starting salaries are going to range from 80 to 100,000 maybe in some states, and we've done some studies in that. And so it gets a little scary as you move along in your workforce, in your pursuit of career, when you make that jump from undergraduate and getting accepted into vet school, and how you're going to pay back that debt. So that's the second. And then just as the ability to sustain a business in a rural community. So when you think about the other things impacting rural communities where you start to see thriving businesses start to go away, veterinary practices are not immune to that. So you've got to be able to find ways to support the practice, have a business model, have a traveling spouse and things like that are very important, and then a workforce that can support the practice. So those are three of the big issues we see.
I think that there's probably even bigger questions about like the age of those vets. You said your dad's been practicing since 1969. Why vets, much like farmers, don't slow down? Those types of things. And we're going to talk about those after we reach the bottom of the hour news. So please stay with us, Todd. We want to ask you some more questions, and we'll be happy to take calls from listeners at 701-293-9000. It is harvest time. Here We Grow 2025 is about to be complete because we're going to the field. I mean, like literally, Dean just left to go to the field to do the video with our farmer, Jim Hewland. So thanks to Dean going out there and getting that done today. I get to host the rest of the show all by myself. So look out, world. Here it comes. To our sponsors, we say a great big thank you to them as well. ND Estate Services, because Mark at ND Estate Services has done an excellent job of helping us out through the summer months, talk about how to avoid probate, protect guardianship, and save on taxes. Give him a call at 701-318-0908. And also to the folks over at Thor Buildings. They've had quite a summer. First of all, storms have knocked down a number of buildings, so they've got a good construction slate that's going on. They still have room for you. They'll fit it in. Unfortunately, the rain that we've had on and off has also delayed a few things. So we look forward to getting out to a site project that they're doing over near Hewland and taking a look at what's happening with Thor Buildings today. So check them out at thorbuildings.com. Guest today, well, we're joined by Todd Greenwood. He's with Farm Journal Foundation. And we've been talking about large animal veterinarians. There's a lot going on here, and I've talked about it before, but I don't think we can overemphasize what's happening in a declining number of them. So, Todd, I'm going to ask you to make a little bit of a comparison here. The average age of farmers in the U.S. is about 58 years old. Where do we stand in the average age of veterinarians these days as well?
It probably had to break that down, Bridgette, looking at rural practice, large animal practice versus companion
Absolutely. Yes.
practices.
Yeah, I want to focus on the large animal
and
especially. Yes.
Yeah, and if you do that, well, the data we're collecting now would indicate that we're trending much older in the rural vets as well. Don't have the exact percentages by a national survey or anything like that, but in the 3 states that we've worked in and soon to be 5, we would see those numbers where you've got close to 30% of the vets in many cases could retire within 10 years.
And that's going to leave a huge hole for us. For the folks that are in practice, the burnout rate is increasing. I mean, your dad's been a vet since 1969. How many of those 24-hour middle of the night calls do you get? Because when you're a vet, it's not just one herd, it's everybody's herd that you're in charge of.
Yes. No, you bring up a really good point, and that is these recent graduates are entering, they're either going to join a practice, hopefully buy into that practice, or they're trying to start their own practice. And one of the first things that our mapping group was, we have a really smart group of people that we've worked with over the last 4 years on this program. And they've indicated that these new practice models, new business models, there needs to be new relationships with their producer, the farmer producers that allow them to have, a lifestyle that is healthy, I guess would be the thing. And part of that is setting boundaries with their farmers that say, at a certain point, I'm going to have to shut the farm off, or we're going to have a practice where certain people handle emergencies, and not everybody's on call 24/7, because it can be overwhelming. Certainly is, and it's not sustainable for them, as some of the research is bearing out.
There have been some changes in education because, as a kid growing up, I remember my dad being really proud to say that our local veterinarian had been top of his class out of Iowa State. Because, first of all, there are not that many veterinarian programs around the world, or around the country, right? We have a limited number. Then 2, there are some changes to help get more students involved, whether that's to help out financially, getting them into practice, etc. Do you have some of the details on those types of things for us as well, Todd?
Yeah, so the pipeline is something we focus on a lot in our program. So we look at it in 4 stages. So there's the high school component, undergraduate, pre-vet. The third is the vet student themselves, and then the 4th is the early career. And so, kind of back to it's a self-perpetuating issue when you think we already have a shortage of veterinarians in rural areas. And then in the rural communities, when I grew up, like I said, we were on every farm. All of the kids in our 4-H programs and in the ag education programs saw my dad or some veterinarian on their farm. You look at it today, same counties, they don't have access to the vet because there's not a vet there. So on the front end, ag teachers aren't prepared. They don't have access. The students don't see a rural practice. So you've got that's an uphill battle already. You get into the undergraduate piece, the highly competitive, programs, and the end goal is to get accepted to vet school. That's a high bar, a high academic bar. You're up against an awful lot of applicants. I mean, the off the charts percentages and increase in vet school applications. So students are faced with that, and then you get into vet school, and when you go from second year to third year, and you look at what you've got coming in debt and where your income is going to be, that's another decision. And so we see these points of attrition along the pathway to getting them into rural practice.
I've always felt that vets have to be smarter than a human doctor, because in a human doctor, they can tell you what's wrong. In a bovine, particularly, or equine, it's like CSI, right? Okay, what do I think's wrong? Unless there is an actual piece of iron protruding from this animal, I might have to do a further investigation. So it is a huge amount of education.
Yeah, you are right, and that speaks to your earlier comment on the burnout, and when we talk about the relationship between the veterinarians and the farmers now. So if you think about, the trends where a vet will call, and we've had it jokingly, they would call and say, "Doc, she's been down for about 3 days. Do you think you can save her?" And if you're a new vet or any vet, and you're called in a really dire emergency life-saving situation all the time, not good for your psyche, not good for the relationship. And maybe farmers don't see the value of that, saving that life. I know they do, but if you think about, what they would spend to be ahead of the game on their crop inputs versus what they would do with herd health checks with the vet, that new model needs to be there and the vets can show economic returns to the farmer when they're there. And there's technology that I think could play into that, and we're starting to see it in some of the areas where diagnosis can happen on the phones before the vet gets in the truck, so they're not they're only paying for windshield time when it's headed to the farm. And so some of that's coming and evolving, but it needs some work for sure.
One of the things in our notes beforehand that you and I mentioned was the Vet Ambassador Network. Can you explain that just a little bit for folks that are listening? Because I think that's probably a valuable key to getting more folks interested. Just like you mentioned, we need ag teachers to be a little bit more prepared to share the information. But would the Vet Ambassador Network tie into that as well?
They do. So we're very fortunate. We have representatives from Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Penn State, Minnesota, and it's growing. And they've done a couple of different things. So over the past 4 years, that group has been to Washington, D.C. We've launched our papers that have elevated the issue. They've been on programs like yours, that reach really wide audiences, published in research papers. And by elevating the issue, we now see the veterinary caucus formed in the Senate. You see Senator Hyde-Smith backing that, and when her daughter was accepted into vet school. You start to see where the discussions are happening at high levels, and we can't thank them enough for doing that. And also, too, it gives the vet students that are really want to go back to rural community, but they're in the smaller percentage of every class, kind of some friends that are out there that they could look to contact and reach out to. But by their work, some great things are happening. So we also work with USDA. There's an announcement tomorrow that looks like Secretary Rollins that just came out. Will be making some sort of announcement on their work to address the rural shortage, but also addressing the shortages within animal health, plant and health inspection services that protect our food supply, and also FSIS, which would be in the meat processing and oversight there too. So, can't thank those ambassadors enough.
Boy, you just brought up a point that I had completely forgotten about. When I think of large animal vets, I think about the local practice where you're getting called when you've got to perform C-sections, or, you've got a horse that's lame, et cetera. Man, there's all those other levels where we need large animal vets. And when you talk about working for APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service put on by USDA, or maybe you're working for USDA in other capacities, do those folks have to have been in practice at one point, or can you do the vet school track and then wind up taking that governmental job without being in practice? Do you know how that works, to help us out there, Todd?
Great question. And you can enter that USDA many, many ways.
Okay.
I think most folks would say, and we've got a couple of our ambassadors that are either have worked for APHIS or have been a part of the USDA's grant process. but they would say there's nothing better than having field experience when you go back into USDA. And that way you understand what environment you're walking into, whether it's high path or African swine, or now you're talking about the screwworm issue. Nothing better than seeing someone who has experience at that level. But you can enter right out of college if you want. So there's different paths that are there for sure.
Well, that's just one of those things. Now, you made mention earlier of rural development. Can you touch on that for us as well, and how that ties into our whole discussion so far today?
Yeah, so part of the research side that we do in this program is look at the economic impact that is driven by a veterinarian. So if you think about how many positions or jobs in a county have a ripple effect. And so in this case, when a county looks at the number of livestock, whether it's dairy cattle, beef cattle, hogs, poultry, and small ruminant animals, large growth in that in some areas. What happens if there's not a vet there? Is there a sale barn nearby that relies on that?
Yeah.
That means, and if there's a sale barn, then there's livestock, there's need for feed, fencing, gates, barns, things like that. But then you think about the veterinarian who employs individuals. So as a business, they're paying taxes into the county. Their employees are paying taxes into the state and into the county. So there's a big ripple economic impact that is felt. So if you lose a vet in these rural areas, other things can go down with it. And so we track that that matters to our foundation as part of our rural economic development work.
That's a huge factor, is, like you said, that ripple effect. It is an employment opportunity. I frequently have a vet that joins us about every 6 weeks. Her name is Dr. Emily Fox. She practices out of the Ashley Veterinarian Clinic. And there are multiple vets within there who cover what is a 100-mile radius around their clinic. That in itself, there's a lot of burnout, right? And that happens to veterinarians. I believe that some of the things that you are doing with the Farm Journal Foundation is to also help them be better about their work-life balance, if there ever can be one, and as well as this coaching and mentoring. And, if there's any of those items that you want to touch on as well today, Todd, as we wrap up, please do. What are the things that folks should know as they get ready to enter veterinarian science?
Well, I mean, you think about begin with the end in mind. And that's, one, where do you want to live? What environment do you want to live in? What kind of a town? Where do you want to live? And then start doing your research early. And if you're a high school student, think about it. Think about the path to getting into vet school. But I think if you're an undergraduate and you're going to get into vet school, think about where you want to do that externship, so you can find the right counties that you want to work in. The one thing that's really they need to know if you're in vet school is that externship is honestly many times the interview itself. So get to know the community. Look at, like you mentioned, look at the radius of the practice service area and what they've got to cover. So how much, windshield time it takes to get to your customers, and figure out what the building and business model needs to be. Look at where the community's trending in livestock issues, like numbers, number of farms. What's the age? To your point, what's the number of farms that are out there that can support you when you get into that? And then I think on the flip side for the farmers and the producers, I think one thing we didn't touch on that's happening. So not only are we talking 30% plus or more vets that could retire, we're transitioning now to where 80% of the vet students are now young women. And you're going to see in the veterinary profession in the next 5 years or so, it's going to transition to the same. So you'll have 80% of the workforce being young women, and they want to come to a community, but the community's got to be aware of what they need as young women coming in there to work and live. So that's another one that really needs to be looked at pretty heavily.
Oh man, it's the same story in every community with every industry. You're coming in there, you need a reasonably paying job, good daycare, because those young women are coming and want to be moms, and affordable housing. And all of that matters tremendously.
Exactly. And every community has a bank, that lend to the farmers. That you need a good accountant, you need a lawyer. They need services. So that also helps people in that community in other ways.
Todd, it has been a pleasure to visit with you today to answer a number of these questions. Thank you for coming and doing that, for being so tremendously prepared. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You as well, Bridgette. Thank you very much. congratulations on this program.
Thank you so kindly for being here. All right, folks, we want to do check of the weather. There might be a few headlines to get to. We'll do that after this. Thanks for joining us here on Weather and Ag in Focus. It's just me, Dean's in the field because we're harvesting wheat today. I'm always very excited about harvest, and I think it's that time to get ready for fall. We certainly had some fall-like weather overnight. Our next few nights are going to be cool. Look for lows in the 50s. By the weekend, lows about 60. Our temperatures, though, wonderfully moderate. We are looking for a high today of about 71. Tomorrow, 78, 82 on Wednesday, and it'll be a nice week for us as we roll into that Labor Day weekend. A little bit of chance of rain on Saturday and Sunday. We'll see what that looks like. But in general, things do look positive for good weather. And a big thank you to our weather sponsor, brought to you by Progressive Ag Risk Management Specialists. August is widely promoted as National Traffic Awareness Month, and it's really time to highlight that less than discussed angle, and that's rural road safety. Earlier, I mentioned the dangers when you're in the field, when you're in the ditches doing some hay work. You've got steep angles. You got to watch out for culverts, rocks. There could be things that, like if there was a crash accident, you have debris in your ditches and you didn't even know was there. And so we want to make sure that folks are being extra careful as well when we see slow-moving vehicles on the roadway and more. Right now, the Agricultural Industry Electronics Foundation, AEF, which is a global nonprofit industry organization, and it is funded by companies like Deere, Case, Kubota, and more, is working behind the scenes on a new interoperable technology like wireless infield communications. And that means that tractors, combines, and implements can talk to each other in the field in a slightly different way than they already do. So these industry members, again, that is the Agricultural Industry Electronics Foundation, are pursuing an industry-wide interoperable solution, and they're going to be using what's called CITS radio technology that could be addressing many accident causes by helping to avoid dangerous situations. You never know, maybe you're going to start to have crash avoidance on some of your farm equipment. But as students are back in school and harvest is underway, we might be moving hay, we're combining, we're doing sugar beets, pre-pile has ended, but we're going to have sugar beet harvest before long. Make sure to talk to your young drivers. I bring this up a lot. They need to make sure not to pass because you may have them trucks taking wide turns. Watch for mud on the roads. Watch for those slow-moving vehicle signs. Be safe to be here another day because you can join us tomorrow on Weather, Ag, and Focus. Stay tuned right now for the Jay Thomas Show.